Wyoming Territory.
You're too young for a widow my age.
Helena Winslow said. The cowboy only smiled.
To me, you're perfect.
3 months earlier, she had very nearly sent him away before he ever crossed her gate. At 42, Helena had believed her life as a woman ended the day she buried Edwin. 3 winters had passed since then, the last of them the hardest the territory had seen in a decade. The winter of '86 had come in early and stayed late. Snow piled to the fence tops by December, and cattle found frozen in coulees clear into April. Half the outfits in the valley counting their losses in the dozens by the time the thaw finally came. Some of the largest operations in the territory had lost a fifth of their herds that season. Helena had lost 11 head herself, not enough to ruin a large operation, but enough to make every spring calf matter a great deal on a ranch her size, and enough to leave the feed account thin and the following season's margin thinner still. She had spent those 3 years running the place alone, mending fences with her own hands when no hired man could be spared, watching the feed account climb a little higher each season, even as the old ranch note her husband had taken out crept slowly, honestly, downward, and enduring the particular kind of pity Millbrook reserved for a widow who was expected, by every unspoken rule the town seemed to agree on without ever saying so aloud, to live out the rest of her days quietly attached to a grief that had already had 3 years to settle. What she had not expected, and did not think she needed, was a young cowboy riding up her lane one spring morning asking after work. He was 25, lean and sun-browned, with a quiet, steady way of holding himself that struck Helena, watching him dismount at her gate, as older than his years, though she caught herself on the thought and didn't finish it, having learned the hard way not to trust a young man's bearing over his actual work. "Ma'am," he said, taking off his hat. "Name's Noah Bellamy. Heard in town you might need an extra hand through calving season." "I might," Helena said, studying him. "I've hired young men before who promised a full season and were gone before the first hard week finished. I can't afford another one of those." "I don't plan on being one," Noah said. "Board, a fair wage, and honest work. That's the whole of what I'm asking." She hired him on a week's trial, telling herself it was purely practical. The trial ended 3 nights later, in the worst way a rancher could ask for proof of a man's worth. A heifer, down hard with a calf turned wrong. Well past midnight, the barn lit only by a single lantern and Helena's own steady nerve. She'd sent Noah to fetch rope and hot water before she'd even finished assessing the trouble, and he'd returned faster than she expected, already rolling his sleeves without being told to. Noah didn't take charge the way some men might have, eager to prove themselves in front of a woman who owned the place. He knelt beside her in the straw and asked, plainly, what she wanted done. "I need you to hold her still while I turn the calf," Helena said, "and I need you not to flinch if this goes wrong." "I won't," Noah said, and didn't. They worked together for the better part of 2 hours, Helena's arm into the shoulder more than once, the heifer's labored breathing loud in the quiet barn, Noah's hands steady on the heifer's flank, exactly where she told him to keep them, even as the animal thrashed hard enough to nearly knock him from his footing twice. He didn't complain. He didn't ask how much longer. He simply held on, watching Helena's face for instruction, until the calf finally came, wet and gasping, into the cold barn air. By dawn, both of them sat back against a stall rail, covered in straw and blood and exhaustion, watching the calf make its first wobbling attempt to stand, its mother already turning to nose at it with the fierce, uncomplicated devotion of a creature that had nearly died delivering it. "You didn't try to take over," Helena said, too tired to be careful with the observation. "Wasn't my place to," Noah said. "You'd done this longer than I've been alive, most likely." Helena laughed, surprising herself with it, a real laugh, rusty from disuse. "Not quite that long," she said, "but near enough." She hired him properly that same morning, the trial week forgotten, and neither of them mentioned it again. There was a chair at Helena's kitchen table that Noah never once sat in, though it stood empty every evening they ate together. A plain ladder-back chair by the window that had belonged to Edwin and that Helena had not moved, not once, in 3 years. She noticed, the second week, that Noah always chose the bench along the wall instead, even when the chair sat closer to the stove and plainly the better seat in the room. "You can sit there," she said one evening, nodding at it. "It's only a chair." "I know," Noah said. "I figured you'd tell me plain enough when it stopped belonging to a memory. Didn't seem my place to decide that for you." Helena didn't answer that night, but she thought about it long after he'd gone out to the bunkhouse and found she was grateful, in a way she hadn't expected to be, for a man young enough to have every excuse for carelessness and choosing instead to wait. The season wore on in the ordinary rhythm of ranch work. Noah fixing the kitchen door that had stuck through 2 winters without being asked. Helena setting out coffee before dawn each morning. The two of them falling into a domestic rhythm neither had quite decided on out loud. His horse, a clever, unrepentant gelding, took to working the ranch gate's new latch open with its nose within a week of Noah installing it. "He's clever," Noah said, watching the horse trot through the gate it had just freed itself. "He's a criminal," Helena said. "Those aren't always different things," Noah admitted, and went to fix the latch a second time. He wasn't perfect at everything, which Helena found, against her own expectations, more endearing than his competence ever managed to be. He attempted biscuits one afternoon while she was occupied in the barn, determined to contribute something beyond fence work, and produced a batch hard enough that Helena tapped one against the table to test it. "You could mend the north wall with these," she said. "I was aiming for sturdy," Noah said, entirely unbothered, and ate 2 of them anyway, rather than waste the flour. Helena had her own habits, ones she hadn't examined closely until she noticed Noah noticing them. She hummed, without meaning to, whenever she was kneading bread, an old tune her mother used to sing, one she couldn't have named if asked. She cut pie unevenly, every time, and always gave the larger slice away without seeming to notice she'd done it, though by midsummer Noah had begun quietly noticing that the larger slice landed on his plate with suspicious regularity. "You do that on purpose," he said one evening, eyeing the pie between them. "Do what?" Helena said, entirely too innocently for the claim to hold. "Give me the bigger piece, every time." "I've simply never learned to cut a pie evenly," Helena said. "Blame my mother. She never taught me proper geometry." Noah didn't argue the point, though he ate the larger slice all the same, and neither of them mentioned it again, though it kept happening anyway. It was on a walk out to check the west fence one June evening, the first of many such walks, though neither called it a habit yet, that they began talking about things that had nothing to do with the ranch. "What did you want?" Noah asked, "before all this? Before the ranch, before Edwin, before any of it?" Helena was quiet a moment, surprised by how long it had been since anyone had asked her that plainly. "I wanted to travel," she admitted. "Just once, before I settled anywhere. I had a little tin of flower seeds my mother gave me, seeds from places I'd never seen, and I always told myself I'd plant them wherever I finally decided to stop moving." She looked out at the darkening ridge. "I've still got that tin. Never once opened it. Seemed foolish to plant traveling seeds in a place I never traveled to reach." "What's stopping you now?" Noah asked. 3 years of believing wanting things wasn't allowed anymore, Helena said, more honestly than she'd meant to. Noah was quiet a while himself before he answered. "I never had much reason to want a place of my own," he said. "Lost my father at 12. Learned early that staying anywhere too long just gave a place more time to leave you first. Easier to move on before it could." Helena looked at him with something closer to recognition than she expected to feel. 2 different fears, she understood, walking the same fence line, hers about loving and losing again, his about belonging anywhere long enough to risk being left. He told her plainly, on an evening in early July, the calving season nearly finished, and the excuse of his employment nearly finished along with it. "I'll be honest with you, Helena," he said, and then stopped, turning his hat over once in his hands before he found the rest of it. "I didn't come here only for the wages. I stayed on past when the work needed me because I couldn't make myself ride off from you. Noah, I know what I look like to this valley, he said. A young cowboy with nothing but a horse and a rope to his name. I know what you are. A woman who's run this ranch through 3 hard winters without asking anyone's help, and who's earned the right to want more than what a drifter 25 years old can offer her. He held her gaze steadily. I'm telling you anyway, because I'd rather you know it and refuse me than have me ride off keeping it to myself. Helena looked at him a long moment, feeling the particular ache of wanting something she'd already decided months before wasn't hers to want anymore. You're too young for a widow my age, she said, trying and failing to keep the words light. Noah smiled, not hurt, not deterred, only certain. To me, he said, you're perfect. She didn't answer him that night beyond a quiet request for time, and spent the following days doing something she wasn't proud of, testing him, in small ways, to see how easily his certainty might crack. You ever think about having children of your own? She asked one morning, watching his face carefully. Land that's yours outright, not another man's widow's? A wife closer to your own age, who could give you 30 more years instead of 20. I think about all of it, Noah admitted. I'd be lying if I said I didn't. But thinking about a thing and wanting it more than what I've already got here are 2 different matters, Helena. Seems to me you're borrowing trouble from a future neither of us has lived yet. For 3 days after that, Helena kept a careful, deliberate distance. No coffee left out before dawn, supper eaten separately, conversation reduced strictly to the ranch's business. Noah didn't press her. He ate in the bunkhouse, did his work without complaint, and waited. By the 3rd evening, Helena found herself standing at the stove with 2 coffee cups in her hands before she'd fully decided to reach for the second one, and understood, looking at it, exactly how much the small, shared rhythm of their days had already come to mean. She found him at the barn that same evening, and didn't explain herself beyond crossing the yard and standing close enough that neither of them needed to say anything further. It was Noah who finally closed the distance, one evening in July at that same west fence, the mountains gone violet with the last of the light, and Helena who found, once it happened, that she'd been waiting for it a good deal longer than she'd let herself admit. They rode into town together the following Saturday for supplies, easy and unhurried, Noah helping her load flour sacks onto the wagon while she settled accounts at the mercantile, neither of them yet aware of how closely Millbrook had begun watching. Old Mr. Fenwick at the mercantile counter, at least, greeted them both with nothing but ordinary courtesy. Your hired man's turned this place around, Mrs. Winslow, Fenwick said, tallying her order. Ranch account's looking considerably steadier than it did last spring. He has, Helena agreed, and didn't think in that moment to wonder how long such uncomplicated goodwill would last once the whole town had finished noticing what Fenwick, watching them load the wagon together, had clearly already noticed for himself. Before we go on, tell us where you're listening from today, and if Helena and Noah have kept you company this afternoon, leave a like for them. Now let's get back, because someone in Millbrook has noticed that Helena no longer rides into town alone, and he has reasons of his own for wanting Noah gone. Thaddeus Kane owned the largest spread in the valley, and had wanted Helena's mountain acreage since before Edwin's death. Not out of simple greed, though greed played its part, but because the clean, reliable spring on her upper pasture was the one dependable water source left in a valley the drought years had left thirsty, and Kane's own herds had outgrown what his land could water alone. He had, in fact, once made Edwin an offer he believed Edwin had all but agreed to, before a hard fall from a spooked horse ended the negotiation permanently, along with Edwin's life. Kane had spent 3 years treating that unfinished conversation as a debt owed to him personally, and Helena's stubborn refusal to sell as an insult rather than simply a widow's right to her own land. A ranch this size can't survive on sentiment, he liked to say, and mostly believed it. Small outfits like hers are dying out. I'm not stealing anything. I'm simply finishing what the land was always going to decide on its own." He was not, by his own accounting, a cruel man. He paid his hands fairly, gave generously to the church building fund, and would have been genuinely startled to hear himself described as a villain in anyone's story. He believed, with the particular sincerity of a man who has never once had to test the belief against his own comfort, that big outfits were simply the future of the territory, and that a woman alone clinging to a small mountain ranch was postponing an outcome kindness ought to hurry along rather than delay. Noah's presence complicated that belief a great deal. A capable young hand meant a ranch that might actually recover instead of failing its way into Cain's hands on its own schedule. And Cain, watching the two of them ride into town together that August, understood exactly what else that presence meant for his plans. The rumors moved through Millbrook exactly as fast as Cain clearly intended them to. By the following Sunday, the pitying glances Helena had grown used to at church had curdled into something sharper in some quarters, though not all. Mrs. Pruitt, her nearest neighbor and a widow 20 years further along than Helena, made a point of sitting beside her that Sunday specifically, arm looped through Helena's as they walked in together. "Let them whisper," Mrs. Pruitt said. "I buried 2 husbands and outlived considerable more gossip than this valley's capable of producing. It never once fed my cattle or mended my fences." Not everyone was so generous. Mrs. Abernathy, who'd brought soup during Edwin's final illness and prayed with Helena at his graveside, now offered only a cool, appraising silence whenever their paths crossed at the Mercantile. Cain made his own position plainer that same week, cornering Helena at the feed store. "This can go easier for you," he said. "Sell now, before the whole county's finished deciding what to make of you and that boy." She found Noah that evening at the barn and told him plainly what Cain had said and how close she'd come, standing in that feed store, to believing it was reason enough to send him away. She didn't make a speech about it. She only crossed the yard, took his hand, and held it. "I'm done letting this town decide what a woman my age is allowed to want," she said. Noah didn't answer with words either. He simply held her hand back, and the two of them stood there a long while in the gathering dark, saying with silence what neither needed to say aloud. The town's disapproval came to a head the following Sunday when Cain, uninvited, raised the matter openly after service, standing at the back of the church as the congregation filed toward the door, loud enough that no one could pretend not to hear him. "Seems to me," Cain said, "this congregation ought to have some say in what kind of example gets set for its daughters. A widow, twice a young man's, well, I won't say the rest of it in a house of God." A murmur ran through the pews. Helena felt her face go hot and felt, beside her, Noah go very still. She stood before she'd fully decided to. "My husband has been gone 3 years," Helena said. "I kept his ranch through every one of them." She looked at Cain. "You never objected to my loneliness when you thought it would make the land cheaper." Someone shifted in the rear pew. Mrs. Pruitt's hand found Helena's own and squeezed it once, briefly. "Now I have help, and you call it shame. I call it my business." Her voice softened, but didn't weaken. "I loved my husband. I still do. But I am 42 years old, Mr. Cain. I am not buried beside him." The pastor, a mild man named Reverend Cole, who had christened half the valley's children and buried the other half's grandparents, stepped forward before Cain could answer. "This is a house of worship, Mr. Cain, not a courtroom," he said, his voice carrying easily to the back pews. "Whatever business you have with Mrs. Winslow, it will keep until Monday." Cain's jaw tightened. He looked for a moment like a man about to argue with a minister in front of his own congregation, and thought better of it. "It'll keep," he said, "though not for long." He looked at Helena. "You'll want to check who holds your note by week's end, Mrs. Winslow." He left without another word. The congregation dispersed slowly, uncertainly, several of the older women glancing between Helena and the departing rancher with expressions Helena couldn't quite read. Not quite approval, not quite condemnation. something still deciding itself. He'd bought the ranch note from the bank that same month, quietly, and now called the full balance due, claiming Helena had missed the April payment entirely. She hadn't. She found the bank's own receipt that same afternoon, tucked in Edwin's old ledger, showing the payment delivered 3 days before the deadline. The note requires 2 consecutive missed payments before anyone can call the balance due, Noah said, reading over the contract Kane's lawyer had sent. And 30 days written notice besides. This letter gives you 8. You sound certain of that, Helena said. Noah set the letter down and was quiet a moment before he answered. My mother lost near everything once, he said. My father trusted a man's handshake over a written note, and it cost her the roof over her head after he died. I was 12, watching a stranger's wagon carry off half of what we owned because there was nothing on paper to stop him. I made myself learn how these things work after that. Sat with every contract I could find, taught myself the language of them, however long it took. Never wanted to be caught out the same way twice, and never wanted to watch it happen to anyone else I cared for either. It was the first real crack Helena had seen in his easy competence. Not a failure, but a wound, offered plainly, the same way she'd offered her own fears at the fence line weeks before. She reached over and set her hand briefly over his on the table, and neither of them said anything further about it, though both understood something had shifted in the offering. Between the two of us, Helena said finally, we might make a fair case of it yet. I expect we will, Noah said. They set out before dawn 2 days later, the drive to the county seat too long to manage in a single afternoon. Helena with food wrapped in cloth, Noah driving the wagon, the two of them talking for the better part of the ride about a great deal more than Kane or the debt. If this goes wrong, Helena said, somewhere past midday, you don't have to stay and watch me lose the place. There's no shame in a man moving on before that. I didn't come this far to leave before the hard part's finished, Noah said. I told you once, staying scares me more than most things. Seems to me the only way through that particular fear is staying anyway. They reached the lawyer's office by late afternoon, and it took the better part of 2 days, a night in a boarding house, careful mornings spent going through the note line by line, before the lawyer confirmed what Noah had already suspected. Kane's acceleration was invalid on its face, the notice period improperly served. The lawyer's letter reached Kane within the week and left no room for his interpretation of the note to stand. He did not trouble Helena publicly again after that, though the debt itself remained, his to hold, however unwillingly, on the note's original honest schedule. Millbrook's opinion took longer to mend than Kane's ambitions did. For a time, Helena still felt the weight of appraising looks at church, still noticed conversations that quieted a shade when she and Noah walked in together. She told herself it no longer mattered, and found, most days, that this was nearly true. It was Mrs. Abernathy, of all people, who came to Helena's door that October with a jar of preserves and an apology she hadn't been asked for. I let a rich man's opinion do my thinking for me, she said, standing awkwardly on the porch step. I brought you soup at your husband's graveside and then turned cold the moment you dared want something for yourself again. I'm ashamed of it, and I hope you'll let an old woman make amends slowly, if not all at once. Helena took the preserves and the apology and found that both mattered more than she expected. By the time the first snow came, several of the churchwomen who'd turned cool that August had found their way back to something like ordinary friendliness, not universal acceptance, not effusive warmth, but the plain, workable civility of a small town that had, in the end, decided a widow's happiness wasn't worth the trouble of continued disapproval. It was that same autumn that a rancher 2 counties over, having heard of Noah's steady hand through calving season, offered him a foreman's position. His own bunkhouse, his own wage, the beginning of the kind of independent life a young man his age might reasonably want. He told Helena about it plainly, the offer laid between them at the kitchen table. I won't ask you to turn it down, Helena said, though it cost her something to say it. I'm not asking your permission. Noah said. I already wrote him back. Told him I'd found the place I meant to stay, and it wasn't his bunkhouse. He looked at her steadily. I told you once that staying scares me. I've decided I'd rather be scared here than safe anywhere else. He asked her that winter, not at the fence line where he'd first spoken his feelings, but in the barn, stacking hay against the cold, the way they'd worked together nearly every evening since October. Snow banked against the walls outside, their breath showing white, even indoors. I turned 26 last month, he said, setting down the last bale. Didn't mention it. Didn't seem the moment. Seems as good a moment as any now. You should have told me, Helena said. I'm telling you now, Noah said, along with the rest of it. I know what people will say. I've known it since the day I rode up your lane. I'm asking anyway, because I've spent this whole year more certain of you than I've ever been of anything else in my life. I'll be 43 next month, Helena said. I can do the arithmetic, Noah said. I've simply never once found it changed my answer. Helena looked around the barn, at the same stall where they'd knelt together through a hard birth in the spring, at the same steady hands that had held a heifer still for her, and later held her own hand across a dark yard. Yes, she said, before he'd fully finished asking. They married in the spring, in a small ceremony at the ranch house itself, Mrs. Pruitt seated in the front row, and Mrs. Abernathy, welcomed now in a way she hadn't been that August, bringing a cake she'd baked with her own 2 hands as a wedding gift. Reverend Cole performed the ceremony on the porch Noah had finished building that same week, wide enough, deliberately, for 2 chairs instead of 1. The guest list was smaller than most Millbrook weddings. No grand affair, no imported music. Only neighbors who'd stood by Helena through 3 hard winters, and a handful of others who'd come around slowly enough that she no longer troubled herself over which category anyone fell into. Kane was not among them, though he sent, unexpectedly, a small crate of good lumber the week before, delivered by a hired man with no note attached and no explanation offered. The closest thing to an apology Helena suspected the man was capable of giving, and one she chose, in the end, to accept in the spirit it was likely intended. Noah wore his one good shirt, mended twice at the collar, and looked, Helena thought, watching him wait for her on that half-finished porch, exactly like a man who'd decided once and for all that staying was worth the risk. Noah sat in Edwin's old chair for the first time that same evening, at Helena's own quiet invitation, and neither of them made anything of it beyond that. The ranch note was paid in full 2 years later, the final receipt arriving by post on an ordinary Tuesday. No ceremony attached to it beyond Helena reading the figure twice to be certain. She tucked it carefully into the same ledger where Edwin had once kept his own careful accounts, closing a debt that had outlasted one husband and nearly cost her a second chance at love besides. That same evening, sitting together on the porch with the mountains going gold and then violet, Helena finally opened the small tin of flower seeds her mother had given her decades before. Bit late for traveling, she said, turning the tin over in her hands. Maybe, Noah said, or maybe you already found the place worth planting them. She planted them along the porch rail the following morning, and every summer after that, watched flowers bloom from seeds meant once for places she'd never gone, grown instead, finally, in the one place she'd decided, after all, was worth staying for. Helena Winslow believed, at 42, that her life as a woman had ended the day she buried her husband. Noah Bellamy believed, at 25, that staying anywhere too long only gave a place more time to leave him first. What they built together taught them both something neither expected to learn, that love doesn't count years the way small towns do, and that the bravest thing either of them ever did wasn't falling for each other. It was choosing, every ordinary day after, to stay. May God bless each and every one of you who listened today. Until next time, keep riding.